Two twin girls were pushed onto the stage as a prank. Everyone waited to see them fall, but when they started singing, the whole bedroom fell silent, and the life of a single dad who thought he had lost everything was completely changed. Before we get started, while you're lying comfortably, please like the video and subscribe to the channel, but only if you really like what I'm sharing here. Comment below and tell me where you're listening from and what time it is. Let's get started. The snow came earlier than usual that year. It was only mid-November, but the roads out in the Nebraska suburbs were already quietly dusted in white, as if someone had taken a stick of cold chalk and redrawn the whole town. My old pickup, a 2002 Ford that groaned more than it ran, was crawling up a small hill near the abandoned railroad tracks. Wind slipped through the window seals like the sigh of a memory too old to name. The heater stuttered on and off, as unreliable as the rhythm of my own life lately. My name is Ethan Caldwell. I'm a carpenter. I live with my daughter Clara in a rundown pinewood cabin at the edge of the forest. Ever since my wife passed away, I felt like a tree with its roots cut clean. And Clara, she turned into a shadow. She stopped speaking, stopped laughing. She just sat there silent, like every sound she once held inside had been buried with her mother. I didn't ask for much, just peace. A long day of sawing wood, a warm meal, my daughter at the table, and a small miracle even if I'd stopped believing in those long ago. But that day was different. Not because of the snow, not because of the wind, but because of how the road all of a sudden seemed to hold its breath. I was about to turn down the path toward the woods when I saw a rusted shipping container lying by the roadside, same as always. But this time, the door was slightly ajar, and something inside waved. A hand, small, desperate. I hit the brakes. The tires crunched over gravel. My hands trembled a little as I opened the door and stepped out, boots sinking into soft snow. The wind slapped my face, biting at the collar of my coat, but I only felt one thing: I had to go there. The old container creaked with each gust of wind. Then I heard something, not a voice, a melody, barely audible, like someone trying to hum a lullaby through fear, a song made of breath. I pulled the door open and froze. Inside were two little girls, twins, no older than 10. One was clutching a damp, moldy blanket. The other held a torn paper snowflake. Their cheeks were red, lips turned purple, but their eyes weren't afraid, just tired. "Please don't tell them we hid here," one of them whispered. I didn't ask who they were. I just knelt down, pulled off my coat, and wrapped it around both of them. "I won't tell anyone," I said, "but right now, we need to keep you alive." That night, I sat quietly by the fire. In the corner of the room, Ivy and Nora had drifted off to sleep, curled up together on the pull-out chair, wrapped in the biggest blanket. We had two little leaves hanging on at the tail end of autumn. And Clara still hadn't come out of her room. I was used to that by now. Ever since that day at the middle school auditorium when she stood on stage, barely 3 lines into her song, before someone laughed. A few whispers followed. It drowned her. Clara collapsed on the spot, fainted from the shock. Since then, she hasn't said a word. Doctors called it selective mutism. But I knew better. It was just the name they gave to a heart that had been broken too early. I tried everything: therapy, music, silence. Nothing could touch the walls Clara had built around herself. Until that evening. While I was cleaning up the kitchen, I heard it. A hum. Barely there. Not loud, not clear. Like a breeze brushing across guitar strings. I turned around. It wasn't Clara. It was Nora stirring a spoon in her now cold cocoa, quietly humming to herself. The tune didn't belong to any song I knew. It was just the sound a child makes when they finally feel safe. Ivy, eyes closed, began to hum along. 2 small voices. Fragile, off-key, but together, they sounded like the 2 halves of one soul, stitched loosely back together. I hadn't said a word yet when Clara's door creaked open. Slowly, she stood there, barefoot, hair falling across one cheek. The firelight flickered in her eyes, not joy, not fear, something softer, like memory being gently woken. Clara didn't speak, just stood. But to me, it was everything. She had stepped out of the shell she'd been hiding in for 2 years. And that alone felt like a miracle. Ivy, Nora whispered, "We have a friend now." Clara said nothing, but I saw her fingers lightly clutch the edge of her shirt. I poured more cocoa. The 3 kids sat together in silence. No pressure, no questions. Just the crackle of firewood, a few shy glances, and warmth that filled more than the room. I sat behind them quietly. The house, usually so still it felt hollow, was beginning to breathe again. My eyes drifted toward the high shelf. There sat a wooden box. Inside, old recording songs my wife used to sing to Clara when she was little, before she ever knew what shame was. I hadn't dared to open it in 2 years, because I was afraid that if I did, I'd be forced to face the part of me that once believed music could save us, and failed. But that night, watching Clara stand silently in the doorway, I knew. It was time to let her hear her mother's voice again. Later, when the house had gone still, I reached for the box. Dust covered my hands. My fingers, rough from woodwork, dulled from years of carving and sanding, trembled as I pressed play. A soft voice rose distant and gentle. "Sleep now, my love. Dream deep and round. I'm right here, I won't be gone." My wife's voice, Clara's lullaby, a sound from a time so far away it didn't feel real. I didn't know if Clara could hear it, but when I turned, she was still standing there in the doorway, staring at the floor, and her lips moved. Not words, but rhythm, memory, life. I turned off the player. I didn't want to break the moment. I whispered, "Your mom used to say you had the most beautiful voice in the world." Clara looked up. Our eyes met, just for a second. Then she turned back into her room. But before the door closed, she said the first thing I'd heard from her in 2 years. "I miss her voice." I sank into the chair, covered my face with both hands, not from sadness, but because for the first time in so long, I could feel hope again. I didn't know what would come next, but I knew this. My daughter had found a crack in her wall, and where light can get in, a song can begin. The next morning, the kitchen felt different. I woke up early, like always, brewed coffee, lit the stove, boiled water. My hands moved from habit, not thought. But when I placed the mugs of hot cocoa on the table, I noticed something. There were 3, not 2 like every other morning. Just like that, a new habit had formed overnight. Ivy and Nora were still fast asleep on the pull-out chair, bundled like tiny hedgehogs. But Clara, she was already at the table, sitting there before I even turned around. She didn't say anything, just nodded softly as I set the mug in front of her. She sat upright, hands wrapped around the chipped porcelain cup, eyes watching the steam rise as if it were telling her something more important than any conversation. I didn't dare break the silence, so we just sat there, the 3 of us. A quiet harmony, the crackle of firewood, the clink of spoons, and the soft yawns of a still dreaming Nora. I had a strange feeling that morning, as if the house itself was learning how to speak again. After breakfast, I climbed up to the attic. It was full of dust and the past. In the far corner, beneath a heavy tarp, lay a wooden case darkened with age until it looked like old coffee. I pulled it out. Inside was the guitar my wife gave me back when I quit my job fixing engines to chase music. A Taylor, honey mahogany wood, worn frets, rusted strings, but intact. I never threw it away, just stopped touching it, like even a soft strum might shatter everything I had left. I carried it downstairs like cradling a piece of memory. Clara stood on the staircase watching. I said nothing, just sat on the stool by the fireplace, opened the case, wiped off the dust with my sleeve, and started tuning it. My hands were slower now, stiffer, but they remembered. Every fret, every whisper of a note, my wife once said, sounded like wind weaving through pine. Clara settled on the floor, leaning back against the couch, eyes wide open. I strummed a chord. The 3rd string was flat. I tuned it. Then I played a few bars. A simple lullaby, the first I ever wrote for Clara back when she was a baby. My wife used to sing it when Clara had fevers. Back then we were our own little trio. I played. She sang, Clara giggled, or slept. The notes flowed out, rough, uneven, but real. Clara closed her eyes. Her fingers tapped softly on her knee, keeping time. Then gently she hummed. No words, just a thin, breathy matching the melody, in rhythm. I didn't look at her. Didn't dare. I was afraid even a glance might scatter the moment like fog in sunlight. So I kept playing, soft, steady. And she kept humming, like she'd never stopped, like her voice had just been sleeping. When I ended the tune, we sat in silence. Clara's eyes were still closed. I said softly, "You don't have to talk, but if you ever want to, just sing." She opened her eyes. There was a shimmer, not of sadness, but relief. The kind of breath someone takes after holding it for too long. She nodded gently, and for the first time in 2 years, I saw my daughter's face, not a frozen statue of memory, but a girl on her way back to being herself. Later that afternoon, while I was rinsing dishes, Nora came over. "Uncle Ethan, she asked shyly. Do you know how to play music? I smiled. A little. I used to believe music could save people. She blinked, then asked, do you still believe that now? I glanced toward Clara, scribbling something on the edge of a folded paper, and replied, I'm starting to again, sweetheart. Maybe I can't save anyone. Maybe music doesn't fix everything, but if just one old melody, one fragile hum, could bring my daughter a step closer to herself, then I'll play it again and again, not for applause, not for an audience. Just so my daughter knows there's always a place where her voice can rise. It snowed for days, but no one seemed to mind. There was something about the soft, endless white of Nebraska winters that teaches you to be quiet, not in surrender, but in order to hear what's beginning to shift inside. Every morning, I rose early to light the fire, pour the cocoa, and set out 3 plates of toast, one for Ivy, one for Nora, and one for Clara, if she felt like coming to the table. Lately, she usually did. She didn't speak, but she sat with us. The 3 of them shared something now. None of them had been born quiet, but all had been made to believe their voices didn't belong in the world. Now, though, they were carving out a space for it. Just a little one right here in this wooden cabin, where an old guitar strummed each afternoon, and soft singing began to piece itself together note by note. That afternoon, I was repairing a broken chair leg, when Ivy approached, hands hidden behind her back eyes, bright in the way only children who still believe can shine. Uncle Ethan, she said, can we sing a song? I looked up from my hammer. Across the room, Nora and Clara were already waiting near the fireplace bench, stifling giggles. Clara was smiling too. The first smile I'd seen from her in years, slightly crooked, a little unsure, but real. Am I the audience? I teased. Ivy nodded earnestly. The only one, and you can be our band too if you want. I wiped my hands on my shirt and settled onto the floor back against the couch. Well then, show me what you've got. Nora started first, a wobbly little tune patched together from bits of childhood melodies. Ivy joined in just slightly higher. Then, Clara. She entered like a breath, soft, quiet, perfectly timed. 3 voices, none of them strong, none trained, none perfect. But there was something about the way they sang that made me hold my breath. They didn't compete. They held each other up, as if music, true music, understood that when 3 wounded hearts meet, they don't create more pain. They become a place to lean on. That night, I pulled out my old songwriting notebook, the one I used when I first became a father. I didn't write anything new, just flipped through old pages, smelled the paper, saw all the lyrics I had never finished, all the lines I once wrote for my wife, back when she still sat beside me singing lullabies for Clara. Clara came over, didn't speak, just pointed to one page. It read, some voices don't need to soar, they just need to be heard by the heart. She nodded, as if to say, I get it now. I tapped the page gently and asked, do you think maybe it's time someone else heard it too? She didn't answer, but she clutched the notebook tight, and I knew she was thinking about it. One evening, while the kids were playing a game with bottle caps, Ivy asked, Uncle Ethan, can we join the school talent show? I almost dropped my mug. How do you even know about that? Our old teacher texted Aunt Carla, she said. We peeked, and we still remember the paper they posted on the school board. I sat down, looked at the 3 of them faces flushed from the fire eyes, wide, like nothing had ever broken them. Performing in front of people isn't easy, I said gently, especially for those who were hurt by it before. Clara stayed quiet, but she looked straight at me, and she didn't look like the same girl who once collapsed on stage. Then Ivy added, if someone laughs this time, we'll just sing louder. I looked at them and felt my heart twist from fear, but also swell with pride. I used to think Clara would never return to the light. Now, she wasn't just returning, she was leading others out of the dark. I nodded. All right then, let's get to work. That night, I opened the guitar case again. The kids built a pretend stage with blankets and pillows, turned the living room into a mini hall. Nora played the host. Ivy held a spoon for a microphone. Clara sat at the piano first time in 2 years. I sat off to the side. The audience, the father. And when they sang this time with piano beneath them, I knew something was growing. Not a dream of fame, not a wish for applause, but a belief that if you have a voice, you should use it to show others. They do too. The school's talent show was held in the same old auditorium, still carrying the scent of wooden seats, ink stains on the stage floor, and that one familiar smell, expectation. I sat in the front row, guitar in hand eyes, fixed on the faded stage curtain. Behind me, the chatter of parents, The shuffle of restless students and the fidgeting of the tech crew created a kind of messy music all its own, a noise made of waiting and nerves. Backstage, Clara, Ivy, and Nora stood shoulder to shoulder. No one said a word, but I could tell they were trembling. Not from fear, but from being fully, vividly awake. When the MC called out the nameless three, a few laughs scattered through the audience. Maybe they thought it was a silly act, or just three lost kids shoved onto the program as filler. The spotlight came on. Ivy walked out first, eyes straight ahead, hands gripping the old mic. Nora followed, holding lightly to her sister's shirt. Clara was last. She didn't speak, but her back was straight. She sat at the piano, placed her hands gently on the keys. There was no applause. No one expected anything. No one knew that what was about to unfold might stay with them longer than anything else that night. Clara played the first chord, soft, hanging in the air, like someone taking a breath for the first time in years. Then she began to sing, slow, quiet, very quiet, but steady. Her voice wasn't polished, wasn't powerful, but it was honest and raw. It sounded like someone telling the story of who they were with words that didn't exist, but feelings everyone could understand. I saw people in the audience lift their heads, stop chewing, lower their phones. No one told them to do that. But something in Clara's voice made them remember the times they too had been silenced. Ivy stepped in with the second verse. Then Nora joined on harmony. Three voices layering like waves touching shore. Not to break it, just to be there. I strummed along gently, each chord deliberate not out of fear, but respect. I didn't want to overpower what was alive on that stage. The light dimmed slightly, and the room fell into complete silence. The last time I'd heard that kind of hush in a crowd was at my wife's funeral, but this silence was full of hope. The song ended with a line from Clara. No big finish, no high note, just this, "If you hear us now, maybe you've also been silent once like me." And that was it. 1 second, 2, 3, then a single clap. Not loud, just someone who couldn't sit still anymore. Then another, then the whole room. Clara stood. She didn't smile, but her lips trembled like she'd just sung out a piece of her heaviest memory. Ivy grabbed her hand. Nora took both of theirs. I bowed my head, not to take credit, but to say thank you, because tonight my daughter didn't need saving. She stood on her own and pulled others up with her. After the show, students surrounded them, asking their names, asking if it was real, if they had practiced a lot. One boy came forward, his face familiar. I recognized him. He'd been one of the kids who laughed that day Clara collapsed. He held out a small mint candy. "This is for you," he said. I'm sorry." Clara looked at him, then took the candy. Didn't speak, just nodded and smiled. For the first time, I saw my daughter smile, not because someone made her, but because she had forgiven herself. That night, as we drove back to the cabin, the three girls fell asleep in the truck, their heads leaning on each other like three ellipses, closing the sentence of a story that was just beginning. I didn't play music. I didn't talk. I just drove through the dark under a snow-scattered sky with one thing held steady in my heart. Tonight proved something. You don't have to shout to be heard. If it's real enough, even a whisper will make the world go quiet to listen. After that night at the talent show, our little cabin felt warmer, though the snow outside hadn't melted one bit. The kids woke up earlier, laughed more, and Clara started writing. Not much, just little lines and a crooked hand on scratch paper, sometimes a lyric, sometimes a feeling she didn't yet know how to name. Ivy drew pictures. Nora tapped rhythms on the table, and somehow, without saying it aloud, we all began dreaming again. One afternoon, we received a letter. It was from Rachel Monroe, Clara's old music teacher. She'd seen a recording of the performance passed around by some parents. Her words read, "Clara didn't just sing. She reminded us of something music has forgotten, that those who've been quiet the longest often carry the most beautiful songs inside." She wanted to recommend their group for the district-level showcase. A bigger stage, a real one. I read the letter in the fading light, torn between pride and worry. Proud because the girls had earned it. Worried because I knew the world outside this cabin didn't play by the same rules. It had forms, requirements, boxes you either fit in or didn't. I filled out the application as their guardian. Called them the Silent Three. A week later, we got a reply. It started with a single sentence that made my chest go still. "We regret to inform you that the Silent Three do not meet the qualifications for district selection." I read on. Ivy and Nora weren't officially enrolled in a public school. Clara was under special reintegration status after therapeutic leave, and the twins had no legal guardian's signature. I put the letter down on the table and stood there for a long time, not sure how to breathe. I didn't know how to tell the girls. That evening, while I set soup on the table, Clara asked, "Did they write back?" I nodded, kept it simple. They said no. They looked at each other. No tears, no tantrums, just a quiet stillness. A little longer than usual. Nora asked gently, "Is it because we don't have the right papers?" I didn't have a good answer, so I just placed a hand on her head and told the truth. "It's not your fault. They just don't understand yet." After dinner, Clara stayed behind to help me clean up. She didn't say a word as we stacked bowls and wiped counters, but just as I turned off the sink, she spoke. "If they won't let me sing there..." I turned to look at her. "Then I'll sing here, anywhere, so someone can hear even if it's only one person." I nodded. "That's enough, sweetheart. That's more than enough." That night, Clara sat at the piano. She didn't ask for permission, didn't announce anything. She just opened the lid, rested her hands on the keys, and played the first chords of something new, something she'd written herself. A slow melody, uneven tender. It reminded me of a breath held too long, finally released. And then she sang. Her voice wasn't trembling anymore. It wasn't someone echoing an old song. It was someone writing her own. Don't ask me why I was silent. Sometimes silence is how I stayed alive. But today, I can sing. Not so anyone remembers my name, but so someone else, someone like me, will know they're not alone. I didn't stop the tears. Not because I was sad, but because I understood that song wasn't meant for judges or medals. It was a gentle declaration from a child once silenced by fear who now teaches grown-ups how to truly listen. We recorded that song on my old phone right there in our living room. I plugged in a pair of headphones, gave it a title, A Song for the Silent, and Clara uploaded it, no promotion, no edits, no expectations. The next day, a message arrived. I'm a night shift nurse. I cried listening to this in the break room. It's the song I wish someone had played for me when I was 12. The song began to travel. Not loudly, not virally, but steadily. And we realized something. Some voices don't need a stage. They just need to be sung even once. None of us truly believed the song would go far. Clara just wanted to share it, like whispering out of a shell. No strategy, no hashtags, no polished production. Just a raw recording on an old phone, dim firelight in the background, the soft creak of wooden floors, and a voice fragile, honest, still finding its strength. Yet somehow within days, the song began to be shared. Not in a burst, not viral in the flashy city way, but quietly, one person at a time. The first message came from a girl named Avery, 11 years old, in Iowa. I sang this song for my dog. We both get teased because we don't talk much, but he liked the chorus. I think he understood. Then came a man, a Gulf War veteran. I don't know why I cried when I heard this. I went 10 years without talking to anyone, not because I didn't want to. I just forgot how. But this song made my silence feel like it mattered. One by one, the messages came in. A teenage girl who lost her voice in a car accident. A boy whose father told him never to cry. A retired teacher who said the song reminded her of students she wished she'd listened to more closely. We didn't know what to do with all of it. Clara quietly wrote down the names of each person who messaged her in a little notebook she kept by her bed. Ivy drew their faces, even if she'd never seen them, just from what she imagined. Nora started recording a cleaner version of the piano part. And me, I stayed quiet. Just watched as these kids did something I once thought only adults could do. Touch another person, not with arguments, but with truth. One morning, I got an email. It was from a man named Alan Griggs, director of Nebraska's Department of Culture and Community. It was short. I heard your daughter's song. It moved me to tears. We're holding a gala next month, a night dedicated to healing through art after the pandemic and social crises. We'd like to invite the Silent Three to perform, not for a prize, just to let someone in the dark corners of the room know they are not alone. I read it 3 times. I didn't feel pride. I felt something else entirely, relief. Like after years of waving a small light in the fog, someone had finally waved back. I printed the email and handed it to Clara. She read it slowly, didn't say a word, then passed it to Ivy and Nora. The 3 of them looked at each other. Clara smiled just a little, not wide, not loud, just that quiet kind of smile people have when they're invited into a place they never thought was meant for them. We began rehearsing not a lot. No expensive gear, no voice coach, just my old guitar, a phone as a mic, and 3 children learning to listen to each other not just with ears, but with their hearts. One evening, Nora asked me, "Uncle Ethan, if we sing at the gala, who do you think will hear us?" I thought for a moment, then answered honestly, maybe a kid at the back of the room thinking they're invisible, or maybe someone older who silenced their voice long ago. But if just one person really hears you, then it's worth singing your heart out. I don't know what that gala will be like, but I do know this. From a small wooden cabin in the middle of a snow-heavy winter, 3 children once silenced have begun to sing. And somehow the world paused long enough to listen. Because sometimes the most powerful songs don't live in perfect melody. They live in the spaces where someone finally dares to use their voice, even if just once. We arrived in Lincoln on an early spring day. The snow had started to melt but hadn't fully gone. The grass was still damp. Trees stood dark and bare, like they hadn't quite decided to believe in warmth again. The gala was held in an old brick building, its windows stained with colored glass. It wasn't the kind of place meant for uncertain songs. As we stepped into the lobby, Nora clutched my hand tightly. Ivy didn't say anything, just looked around slowly like she was trying to memorize everything. Clara came last, quietly carrying the notebook that held her lyrics. Its edges were bent and frayed, but inside was a journey no one else could have written for her. There were no flashing lights, no celebrities. This year's gala was for those who had once disappeared in the noise of the world. People with disabilities, people who'd survived abuse, people who'd lost everything and still chose to come back. Clara, Ivy, and Nora didn't stand out. We had no agent, no entourage, just one tech guy who leaned down and said gently, "When the lights dim, you begin. No introduction needed. Let the song do the talking." We waited backstage. I noticed Clara's hands tremble slightly as she opened her notebook. Nora stared down at her shoes, the same canvas ones I'd patched the day before. Ivy sat upright, then gave me a small nod. She knew this was the right place to be. When the performer before them, a blind girl painting with sticks and color, finished her set, the lights slowly faded. No host stepped forward. Just the hush of the room, the softness of footsteps, and 3 small figures walking out into the dark. No names, no greeting. Just a piano at center stage, one single microphone. Clara sat. Ivy stood in the middle. Nora just behind, like always. And the whole room held its breath. Something about them made you want to listen. Clara played the opening chord. I knew it instantly. It was a reimagined version of the lullaby my wife used to sing to her. But this time, it came from Clara's hands, aged her own. Ivy began the first verse. Not loud, not strong, but clear. Like each word had to climb a little hill before it could reach the air. Then Nora joined. Then Clara's voice rose, no longer the echo of pain, but the beginning of her return. None of them tried to impress. They didn't raise their hands, didn't scan the crowd. They simply sang for themselves. And for anyone who had once said, "I don't think I'll ever speak again." I didn't speak. Not because I didn't want to, but because the world taught me silence was survival. But tonight, if anyone can hear, I sing not to be famous, but so someone sitting quietly in the dark knows they're not alone. No one moved. I saw an older woman reach for a tissue. A man in a suit slowly took off his glasses. A little girl in the back gripped her mother's hand, head tilted, listening carefully. And me, I held Clara's notebook tight on my lap as if it were the story of all of us. The song ended on a soft, final chord. No dramatic finish. Just a sound that settled into the room and stayed. They bowed, then turned to leave. No one stood, no one clapped at first, until Clara paused, looked back and nodded. Then one by one the audience stood, not with applause, but as if standing was the only way left to say, "We understand." I stood last, not because I was their father, but because I too had been quiet for far too long. That night, back at the hotel, Clara handed me her notebook. On the last page, she had written one line. "We don't need a stage to be ourselves. We just need each other and someone who truly listens." And that night, I cried for the first time in years. Not out of grief, but because I finally knew the things we thought were gone forever can come back, if we're patient enough to wait for them to find their voice again. After the gala in Lincoln, my phone buzzed every morning. Not reporters, not TV stations, but people, ordinary, often overlooked people. From recovery centers, libraries, therapy rooms, nursing homes. places without spotlights, places where the only thing they needed was someone to remember they were still here. The first invitation came from a woman named Martha. She ran a small mental health recovery center where most patients hadn't lost their voices because of illness, but because no one had ever listened to them. Her email said, "We don't have a stage, just a shared room with old chairs. But if the kids came, I believe some of our patients might remember that they used to sing beautifully." We drove 4 hours west to get there. There were 12 people in that room. The youngest maybe 30, the oldest closer to 80. One woman sat in the corner, gray hair tied with a yarn string, quietly counting the glasses on the table. An elderly man stared out the window, eyes lost somewhere in another year. Clara walked in, silent. Nora gave a small wave. Ivy smiled gently. I placed my guitar beside a metal folding chair and began tuning it slowly. No microphone, no lights. Just 3 children, a shaft of soft sunlight, and a song about to open its heart. They began to sing, slowly, softly, as if each note was a small key searching through the air for a lock that might still be willing to open. At first, no one reacted. Then in the back row, the man by the window blinked. The woman counting cups paused, her lips moving in rhythm. And a young girl, who according to Martha hadn't taken off her headphones in weeks, gently slipped one earpiece off. Ivy raised her voice for the chorus. "If no one's asked how you are today, please know we're listening." Clara's hands shook a little on the final chord, not from fear, but because she knew. The ones who seemed furthest away were right there, and they were hearing her. When the song ended, silence held. A long one. Then the woman who'd been counting glasses clapped, once, then twice. Offbeat, uneven. But it was the first applause that room had heard in 6 months. Martha cried. We drove home in silence, not out of sadness, but because we had stepped into something sacred, a place no one teaches you how to enter, where music is not for performance, it's for reminding people they still exist. The next week, it was a nursing home, then a school for children with emotional disorders, then a tiny library in the middle of nowhere. The librarian said, "I think these shelves have been waiting for voices like this for years." The kids didn't sing to be praised. They never asked, "Will this be online?" They just sang, as if it was the one thing they could do to remember who they really were. After one session in a dusty old library, a boy around 13 came up to me. "Uncle Ethan," he said shyly, "can I ask something?" Of course. Were they scared? The first time they sang in front of people. I looked at him, thin, hair falling over his ears, voice scratchy like he'd swallowed too many words he wasn't allowed to say. I knelt down. "Sick scared," I said. "Absolutely." He didn't say anything, just nodded. A month later, I got a recording in my inbox. That same boy, singing a song he wrote himself. He sent it to Clara. That's when I understood the Silent Three wasn't a band anymore. It was something quieter, stronger, a gentle, steady whisper that never fades. In a world that shouts, there's still a place for those who speak softly and mean every word. We didn't sell tickets. We didn't release an album. But those voices, one by one, in small rooms no one sees, stitched something back together in people. One tear at a time, unseen by most, but felt by everyone who heard. Summer came early. The snow had melted completely. Grass crept back around the cabin. The old wooden swing I once made for Clara was painted a new, soft, yellow, uneven strokes. Ivy and Nora did it. Sloppy, but beautiful. Better than any color I ever picked myself. Life settled into a rhythm that didn't try to impress anyone. Not loud, not silent. Just enough to live, enough to love, enough to say thanks. One afternoon, while I was fixing the porch roof, my phone rang. It was a music producer from Chicago. They'd heard the Silent Three. He said the girls had raw, emotional texture, something the industry's never seen. They wanted to offer a contract studio time promotion press. I didn't feel thrilled. I didn't feel scared. I just sat on the porch steps, staring out at the hill where the kids were flying kites, and wondered, do we really have to go far just to hold on to what we've only just found? Again. That night, I brought it up over dinner. I explained everything. The offer, the travel, the change. The fact that it would mean leaving the cabin, the visits to libraries and shelters, leaving the places where applause was rare, but hearts were always listening. The kids didn't react right away. They just ate more slowly. Then Ivy asked, "If we said yes, would you be sad?" I hesitated, then told the truth. I wouldn't be sad, but I'd worry that the thing that helps you sing might get lost if you start singing for people who expect something back. Nora whispered, I think we should sing for the ones who need it, not the ones who pay for it. Clara was quiet the whole time, until we were done cleaning up. She walked over, held my hand, and for the first time, not in a song, not in a smile, but in her real voice, she said, I don't want to leave this place, Dad. I didn't speak. Her hand was small but steady, warm. I'd never prepared for that voice to come back. I didn't know it would return in such a simple sentence. But it was exactly what I'd been waiting to hear. My daughter had returned. This time, in her own words. I bent down and held her. Not tightly, not hurriedly. Just enough to hold everything still. All the loss, all the silence, all the half-sung songs. And I whispered back, I don't need to go anywhere either. Just hearing you again is more than enough. We turned the offer down, not because we lacked ambition, but because we'd already found what mattered most. A voice, a family, and healing. The truest music we ever made wasn't on a record. It happened in quiet rooms, where someone sat down and sang not to perform, but because they still believed in hope. That summer we kept going, to a school for the hearing impaired, a rehab center, a pop-up library in the middle of a field. And the song, A Song for the Silent, was no longer Clara's alone, no longer a name picked at random. It had become a lantern for anyone who had once lost their voice, anyone who'd been laughed at, ignored, broken by little things, a light to help them find their way forward. On the last night of summer, Clara sat beside me on the porch. She didn't say much, didn't need to. She opened her notebook and wrote one final line on the last page. Silence isn't the end of a voice. It's just where it rests, waiting for someone patient enough to wake it. I read it, nodded. Would you sing it again, Clara? She smiled, softly. This time, I want you to sing with me. If you're somewhere out there feeling like you don't have a voice, remember this. All it takes is one person to believe you still have something to say. And even silence can turn into music. This is the final story in the Single Dad story series. If you'd like me to tell more stories, ones that heal, that feel true, that drift in like a breeze at midnight, please like and subscribe. And let me know, where are you listening from? And what time is it where you are? I'm listening with you, always.